The silence that fell over that restaurant table was worth every difficult year I'd endured. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Graham Westwood, and at 63, I thought I'd seen enough of life to know when someone was showing me who they really were. Turns out, I was wrong. It took me 3.5 years of marriage to Patricia, and one particular evening with her family, to finally understand that some people will never see your value until you force them to look. It started the way these things always do, quietly. Little comments here and there that I told myself weren't meant the way they sounded. Patricia and I met at a community fundraiser in Calgary. I was there because I genuinely cared about the cause. She was there because, well, that's what people from families like hers did. They showed up, they wrote checks, they networked. I should have paid more attention to that difference. I'm a safety consultant. That's what I told people. Anyway, because it was true. I consult on workplace safety. The fact that I own the consulting firm, that we hold contracts with every major oil company operating in Alberta, that we've expanded into mining operations across British Columbia and Saskatchewan, that my personal signature is on safety protocols, protecting over 40,000 workers across Western Canada. Well, I never felt the need to lead with that information. My father taught me that real wealth whispers. He started our family business in the 70s. Nothing fancy. Just good honest work, keeping oil workers safe. By the time he handed it to me in the 90s, we had 12 employees. Now we have 230. But I still drive a 10-year-old Silverado. I still buy my coffee at the same Tim Hortons every morning. And I still tell people I'm a safety consultant when they ask what I do. Patricia found that embarrassing. I remember the first family dinner where I started to notice the pattern. We'd been married maybe 8 months. Her parents, Robert and Eleanor, had invited us to their home in Mount Royal, one of those old-money Calgary neighborhoods where the houses have names instead of just addresses. Her father made his money in car dealerships, 3 of them spread across the city. Good business, respectable, but the way they talked, you'd think they were the Rockefellers. That night, Robert asked me about work. So, Graham, Patricia tells us you're in consulting. What sort of consulting? Workplace safety, I said. Industrial sites, mostly. Oil and gas, some mining operations. I watched his face do that thing, that subtle shift where interest becomes polite tolerance. Ah, yes, important work, I'm sure. Someone has to make sure the working men stay safe. Patricia jumped in quickly. Graham's very good at what he does, Dad. He works incredibly hard. The way she said it, like she was defending me for having a paper route. I should have said something then. I should have mentioned that just that week, I'd signed off on a safety overhaul for a Shell facility that would cost them $8 million to implement because I'd insisted on it. I should have told him that executives from Suncor had flown down from Fort McMurray specifically to meet with me. But my father's voice was in my head. Real wealth whispers. So I just smiled and said, I do my best. Eleanor changed the subject to their upcoming cruise to the Greek islands. The conversation moved on. But I caught the look between Patricia and her mother. It was quick, just a flicker, but I saw it. Sympathy. They felt sorry for her. Married to someone who worked in safety consulting. The real trouble started when Patricia's younger sister Helen got serious with her boyfriend Derek. Derek worked in finance, something with hedge funds and investment portfolios. He wore Brioni suits and drove a BMW M5. He was 34, 12 years younger than me, and he had the confidence of a man who'd never failed at anything because he'd never actually risked anything. The first time I met Derek was at Sunday brunch at the Mount Royal house. It was late September, and the aspens were turning gold in the river valley. Derek showed up 20 minutes late, made a joke about his pre-brunch workout at the club, and immediately dominated the conversation. So you're Graham, he said, extending his hand. His grip was firm, calculated to be just slightly too firm. Patricia's told us all about you. Safety consulting, right? That's right. Fascinating. The way he said it made it clear it was anything but. Must be steady work. I imagine there's always some regulation or another that needs checking. Something like that. Derek just closed a major portfolio restructure, Helen gushed. 7 figures in managed assets. 8, actually, Derek corrected with practiced humility. But who's counting? He laughed at his own joke. I noticed Patricia wasn't meeting my eyes. She was cutting her eggs Benedict into precise little squares, her jaw tight. Over the next few months, the dynamic became clear. Family dinners were Derek's stage, and I was the supporting act, if I was lucky. More often, I was the punchline. It was never overtly cruel. That's not how people like them operate. It was all wrapped in concern, in jokes, in helpful suggestions. "Graham, have you thought about pivoting into corporate training?" Eleanor asked once. "I hear there's good money in that, and it might be less, well, hands-on." "Patricia, dear, is Graham able to contribute to the household?" Robert asked another time, right in front of me. "If you need help, you know your mother and I are always here." I contributed plenty. I paid for everything. Our house in Elbow Park, I bought it outright, no mortgage. Patricia's Mercedes, my name on the title. The skiing trips to Whistler, the summers at their cabin at Sylvan Lake, the dinners at Teatro and River Cafe, my credit card. But because I didn't talk about money, because I didn't wear my success like Derek wore his suits, they assumed I was struggling. Patricia never corrected them. That was the part that hurt most. Not Derek's smug commentary or her parents' thinly veiled pity, but Patricia's silence. My own wife would sit there, watching them minimize me, and say nothing. Sometimes, driving home after these dinners, I'd try to talk to her about it. "Your family seems to think I'm barely making ends meet." "Oh, Graham, don't be sensitive. That's just how they are. They grew up differently. Your sister's boyfriend called me blue-collar tonight. I have 3 engineering degrees." He was joking. "You're taking it the wrong way." "Am I? Because it happens every time we see them. Can we not do this? I'm tired." And that would be the end of it. I'd lie awake next to her, listening to her breathe, wondering why I stayed. The answer, I told myself, was love. I loved her. I loved the woman I'd met at that fundraiser, the one who'd laughed at my stories, who'd seemed different from her family's stuffiness. I kept thinking she'd remember that person, that version of herself. I kept thinking next time would be different. It never was. The breaking point came in early March, 3.5 years into our marriage. Robert and Eleanor had invited us for dinner to celebrate their 40th anniversary. It was meant to be immediate family only, but Derek was there, of course. He was practically family now, they kept saying. He and Helen were getting serious. There was talk of engagement. The dinner was at Alloy, one of those downtown restaurants where they serve 5-course meals on plates the size of saucers. The kind of place where you're supposed to be impressed by the building more than the food. Derek had his arm around Helen, and they were glowing with that nauseating new relationship energy. "We've been looking at rings," Helen announced as the appetizers arrived. "Derek's been so generous. He's talking about a 3-carat emerald cut. Only the best for you, darling," Derek said, kissing her temple. Eleanor clasped her hands together. "Oh, how wonderful. Another wedding to plan. Patricia, remember your wedding?" Patricia's smile was tight. "Of course, Mother." "Such a lovely, intimate affair," Eleanor continued. "That was their code for small and disappointing. We'd had 40 people at a garden wedding, exactly what we'd both wanted, or what I'd thought we both wanted." Derek leaned back in his chair, swirling his wine. "Speaking of which, Graham, I've been meaning to ask, what exactly does a safety consultant do day to day? I'm trying to picture it. Do you, inspect hard hats?" There was laughter around the table. Light, polite laughter. The kind that says we're all having fun here. "It's more complex than that," I said evenly. "I'm sure it is. I'm just trying to understand. Do you work for a company, or are you independent?" "I run my own operation." "Oh, a small business owner. That's terrific. Very entrepreneurial. How many people work for you?" I could have told him. I could have said 230 employees across 4 offices. I could have mentioned our annual revenue, our client list, the fact that we'd been featured in the Canadian Business Journal. But something in his tone, in the way Patricia was studying her plate, in the way Robert and Eleanor were watching, with that familiar pity, made me pause. "It's a modest operation," I said instead. "We get by." Derek nodded sagely. Sure. Nothing wrong with modest. Not everyone needs to be a high roller. The world needs worker bees too, right?" He laughed and squeezed Helen's hand. "That's what I always say. Someone has to do the ground-level work while guys like me handle the big-picture stuff." My fingers tightened around my fork. Patricia touched my arm under the table, a warning. Don't make a scene. Don't embarrass her family. Robert cleared his throat. Derek's being modest himself. His firm just landed a major client. How much was that portfolio, Derek? 15 million? 18, Derek corrected. But honestly, it's not about the numbers. It's about trust. When people have real money, they need someone sophisticated to manage it, someone who understands their world. He looked at me when he said it, not at me, through me. Graham understands hard work, Patricia said quietly. That's what matters, the way she said it. Like hard work was a consolation prize for not having Derek's success. Like I was a child who needed defending because I couldn't keep up with the adults. The main course arrived. Alberta beef, perfectly cooked, tasting like sawdust in my mouth. The conversation moved on to Derek and Helen's wedding plans, to the European honeymoon they were planning, to the house they were looking at in Mount Royal, just streets away from her parents. You two should think about moving closer, Eleanor said to Patricia. It would be so lovely to have both my girls nearby. Graham and I are happy in Elbow Park, Patricia said. Of course. I just mean, well, the Mount Royal area is rather special, though I suppose the price point is. She stopped herself, glancing at me. Well, everyone lives where they're comfortable. I was setting down my fork when Derek spoke again. Actually, Graham, I've been thinking about what you said. Running a small safety business. Have you considered selling? I know some people in private equity who specialize in rolling up small service companies. You'd probably get a decent multiple, enough to retire comfortably. Then Patricia wouldn't have to worry. The table went quiet. Even Helen looked uncomfortable. Worry about what? I asked, slowly. Derek blinked, clearly thinking he was being helpful. Well, you know, the future, financial security. It must be stressful, being self-employed in such a specialized field, especially at your age. What are you, 62? 63? 63. Right. So retirement's coming up, and with the oil and gas industry being so volatile, I just thought, well, I'd hate to see Patricia struggling if something happened to the business. Patricia's hand was on my arm again, gripping tighter now. She could feel it, the shift in my breathing, the way my shoulders had gone rigid. Derek's just trying to help, Graham, she said softly. Trying to help. My wife. Telling me that this boy, and he was a boy, regardless of his Brioni suits and his BMW, was trying to help me. Me, who had forgotten more about business than Derek would ever learn. Me, whose company's insurance policies alone were worth more than Derek's entire annual salary. I looked around the table. Robert, nodding along, thinking Derek made excellent points. Eleanor, her face full of concern for her poor daughter, married to the aging safety consultant. Helen, looking embarrassed but not enough to tell her boyfriend to stop. And Patricia, my wife, squeezing my arm in warning. Not in support. In warning. You're right, I said finally. I should think about the future. Derek brightened, missing the edge in my voice entirely. Exactly. I could introduce you to some people. We could grab coffee, talk strategy. I mean, if you're pulling in, what, $200K a year? You could probably sell for $1 million, maybe $1 million to $5 million if you package it right. That's not retirement money in Calgary, but it's a start. $200,000. He thought I made $200,000 a year. I stood up. The chair scraped against the floor, too loud in the quiet restaurant. Graham? Patricia hissed. I need some air, I said. Don't be dramatic, she whispered urgently. You're embarrassing me. Embarrassing her. I was embarrassing her. I looked at my wife. Really looked at her. At the woman I'd loved, who I'd thought loved me, and I saw it clearly for the first time. She was embarrassed by me. Not in this moment. In every moment. Every time she introduced me. Every time her family asked about me. Every time Derek made his little comments. She was embarrassed to be married to a man her family saw as beneath them, because she saw me that way too. I'll be outside, I said. I walked out of Alloy into the March cold. Calgary in March is unpredictable. It might be spring, or there might be snow coming. That night, the air was sharp and clean, the kind that burns your lungs if you breathe too deep. I stood on Stephen Avenue, watching people walk past, couples and groups laughing, living their lives, unaware that mine was cracking apart. My phone buzzed. Patricia, where are you? You need to come back. You're making this worse. Not, are you okay? Not, I'm sorry they treated you that way. Just that I was making it worse. I typed back, I'm going home. Graham, don't be childish. It's Dad and Mom's anniversary. Tell them I'm sorry. Tell them anything you want. I turned my phone off and walked to where I'd parked the Silverado. The drive home to Elbow Park took 20 minutes. 20 minutes of city lights and empty streets, and the slow realization that I'd been lying to myself for 3.5 years. Patricia didn't come home that night, or the next night. On the third day, she came by with her sister to pack some clothes. "We need to talk," I said when I heard her key in the door. "There's nothing to talk about," she said, not meeting my eyes. "You walked out on my parents' anniversary dinner. You humiliated me." "I humiliated you?" "Yes, Graham. You couldn't just sit there and be pleasant for one evening. Derek was trying to help, and you acted like a child. Derek was insulting me. Your whole family insults me, every time we're together. That's not true. They've been nothing but kind to you. If you can't handle normal family dynamics, that's your problem." "Normal? Patricia, your mother asks if I can afford to support you. Your father treats me like hired help. And Derek is successful. He's accomplished. Is it his fault that makes you feel insecure?" The words hung between us. Feel insecure, as if the problem was my feelings, not their behavior. "You've never defended me," I said quietly. "Not once in 3.5 years. Every time they've made me feel small, you've stayed silent. Because you're being too sensitive. You read into everything. Am I reading into you packing a bag right now?" She stopped, clothes in her hands. For a moment, I thought I saw something in her face. Doubt, maybe, regret. But then Helen appeared in the doorway. "Patricia, we should go. Mom's waiting." My wife looked at me, and whatever I'd seen was gone. "I'm staying at my parents' for a while. We both need space." "Space? That's what you call this?" "I call it giving you time to think about whether you want to be part of this family or not. Because right now, you're not acting like it." They left. I stood in my own house, in the home I'd bought, surrounded by the life I'd built, and realized none of it had ever really been mine. Not in Patricia's eyes. I was just the disappointing husband she'd had to make excuses for. The divorce papers arrived 6 weeks later. Patricia wanted the house. Her lawyer called it the marital residence, as if calling it something fancy made it less mine. She wanted alimony. She wanted half of what she thought I had, which her lawyer had estimated at roughly $300,000 in assets. They had no idea. I called my lawyer, Tom Brennan, who'd been handling our corporate legal work for 15 years. "Graham," he said carefully when I told him about the filing, "you need to know, if this goes to court, your actual finances will become part of the record." "I know. Patricia's going to find out exactly how much Westwood Safety Solutions is worth." "I know that too." "And you're okay with that?" I thought about 3.5 years of silence, of being small, of watching my wife choose her family's opinion over her husband's dignity. "Yeah," I said. "I'm okay with that." The divorce took 8 months. Patricia fought for everything, right up until the discovery phase when her lawyer saw the real financial statements. Westwood Safety Solutions wasn't a modest operation. Last year's revenue, $42 million. My personal net worth, $23 million. The house she wanted? I'd paid cash for it, $750,000, 6 years before I'd even met her. Her lawyer called for a settlement meeting. We met at a neutral office downtown, all wood paneling and uncomfortable silence. Patricia sat across from me, and I barely recognized her. She looked older, harder, or maybe that's who she'd always been, and I'd just been too in love to see it. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked. Not angry, hurt. Would it have mattered? She didn't answer. In the end, she got nothing. Alberta's a no-fault province, but we'd had a prenup, her idea. Actually, back when she'd thought I was the one with less. The house was mine, bought before marriage. The business was mine, built over 30 years. She walked away with exactly what she'd brought to the marriage. Her clothes, her car, and her family's opinion. I heard through mutual friends that she'd moved back in with her parents, that she'd told everyone I'd hidden money from her, that I'd lied, that I was vindictive. Maybe I was. I didn't care anymore. A year passed, then another. I threw myself into work, expanded into Saskatchewan, opened a new office in Edmonton, hired 50 more people. Life moved on. Then, 2 weeks ago, my brother Andrew called me. "Graham, I need a favor. I'm in Vancouver for a conference, and I've got a dinner meeting tonight at Hawksworth. Client meeting. The guy I was supposed to bring canceled last minute, and I don't want to go alone. Any chance you're free?" I'd flown into Vancouver that morning for a site inspection at a port facility. "What time?" 7. "I'll owe you one." Hawksworth is the kind of restaurant that makes Alloy look like a truck stop. The kind of place where CEOs and politicians go to be seen. Andrew's client was there when we arrived. A silver-haired man in his 60s, who ran a mining operation in northern BC. We were shown to a table by the window, city lights glittering below. That's when I saw them, 3 tables away. Robert and Eleanor, older now, grayer. Helen, wearing a diamond that probably cost more than a Honda, and Derek, still in his Brioni suits, still with that confident smile. They were with another couple I didn't recognize, all of them laughing at something Derek had said. I felt Andrew's hand on my arm. Isn't that... Yeah. Do you want to leave? I looked at them. At the life Patricia had chosen over me. At the family that had spent 3.5 years making me feel small. No, I said. Let's have dinner. We sat down. Andrew's client, Brian Hutchison, was talking about safety protocols at his operation, about how they'd had 2 incidents last year that had spooked their insurance carrier. We need a complete overhaul, he was saying. Problem is, most safety consultants don't understand mining. They try to apply oil and gas protocols, and it doesn't translate. I might know someone who could help, Andrew said, grinning at me. Oh, you work in safety? Brian asked. Here it was. The moment I could say yes, I'm a consultant, keep it vague the way I always had. Or I could do something different. I own a safety consulting firm, I said clearly. Westwood Safety Solutions. We primarily work in oil and gas, but we've been expanding into mining operations over the past 18 months. We currently manage safety protocols for 3 mid-size mining companies in Alberta and Saskatchewan. Brian's eyebrows went up. Westwood Safety Solutions? You're Graham Westwood? I am. I've heard of your company. You're the ones who redesigned the Suncor protocols after that incident in 2019. That was us. My operations manager keeps bugging me to reach out to you people. Says you're the best in Western Canada. He extended his hand across the table. This is fortuitous. Brian Hutchison. I run Hutchison Mining. We shook hands. I was aware, peripherally, of movement at the other table. Helen had glanced over, then looked again. I saw her lean toward Derek, whisper something. Our conversation continued. Brian wanted to talk specifics, safety protocols, incident response, insurance requirements. Andrew kept the flow going, ordering wine, making introductions when the waiter came by. At one point, Brian pulled out his phone. I'm putting you in touch with my operations VP right now. When are you back in Calgary? Friday. Perfect. Can you come by our offices next week? I want you to see our operation. Tell me honestly what we need. Absolutely. I was giving Brian my card when I heard a voice I hadn't heard in 2 years. Graham? I looked up. Eleanor was standing beside our table, Robert a few steps behind her. Her face was a careful mask of surprise, the kind that looks rehearsed. Eleanor. Robert. I nodded politely. How are you? We're well. We didn't expect to see you here. Her eyes flicked to Andrew, to Brian, to the wine on our table, recalculating. Business dinner, I said simply. I see. She hesitated. How have you been? Very well. Busy, but well. Robert stepped forward. Graham, we've always meant to reach out. After the divorce, the way things ended, is water under the bridge. I finished. I hope you're both well. There was an awkward pause. I didn't fill it. Brian and Andrew watched with polite interest. Well, Eleanor said, finally, it was good to see you. We should let you get back to your dinner. They retreated to their table. I watched Eleanor lean in, speaking urgently to Derek and Helen. Watched all 3 of them look at me, then look away quickly when they realized I'd noticed. The dinner continued. Brian and I exchanged information, made tentative plans. The conversation was good, mining safety, industry changes, future expansion. Andrew was in rare form, telling stories, keeping everyone laughing. Then Derek appeared beside our table. Graham, I thought that was you. He extended his hand. I shook it, brief and firm. Didn't mean to interrupt. Just wanted to say hello. Hello, Derek. You're looking well. Business must be good. It is. Still in the safety consulting business? Still. He nodded, uncertain now. He'd come over expecting something, but he wasn't sure what. I heard you and Patricia well. I heard. I'm sorry it didn't work out. These things happen. Yeah, they do. He glanced at Brian, at Andrew. Well, I'll let you get back to your dinner. Good to see you, Graham. He walked away. Brian leaned forward. Old friend? Ex-wife's family, I said. Ah. Brian was quiet for a moment. The guy seemed surprised to see you here. Long story. I've got time. So I told him. Not everything, but enough. About Patricia, about her family, about 3.5 years of being treated like I wasn't quite good enough. Andrew filled in details I'd left out the anniversary dinner. Derek's comments. The divorce. Wait, Brian said. So they thought you were just some small-time consultant? That's what I told them. Why? It was a fair question. My father used to say real wealth whispers. I took that seriously. Maybe too seriously. Brian laughed, not unkindly. Well, they know now. I practically announced who you were when I recognized your name. He had. Loud enough that the neighboring tables would have heard. Loud enough that Derek, heading back to his table, would have heard. I'd watched his steps slow, watched him process what Brian had said, watched him reach his table and lean down to Helen, speaking urgently. I should probably go say hello properly, I said. It would be rude not to. Andrew grinned. Now? Now seems good. I stood and walked over to their table. 6 pairs of eyes looked up at me. Derek's smile was frozen. Helen looked pale. Robert and Eleanor were both very still. I didn't want to interrupt your dinner, I said pleasantly. But it seemed rude not to acknowledge family. Graham, Helen said. We didn't know you'd be here. Business. Last-minute thing. I looked at Derek. How's the portfolio management going? Good. It's going good. Still at the same firm? Yeah, same place. That's great. Stability's important. I let that sit for a second. Derek, I wanted to apologize. He blinked. Apologize? For that night at Alloy. Your anniversary dinner. I nodded to Robert and Eleanor. I walked out. That was rude of me. I should have handled it better. Oh, Eleanor said. Graham, there's no need. No, I insist. You were trying to help, Derek, with your suggestions about selling my business. That was kind of you to think of Patricia's future. Derek's face had gone red. I was just... You were being thoughtful. I appreciate that. And you were right, actually. I should have been thinking about retirement, about security. I smiled. That's why I'm glad the business is doing well enough that it's not a concern. The business, Robert said slowly. The safety consulting. Westwood Safety Solutions. Yes. We've had a good couple of years. How good? Derek asked, then immediately looked like he regretted it. Good enough that I can afford the occasional dinner at Hawksworth. I gestured vaguely. Good enough that when Brian Hutchison over there asked if I could consult on his mining operations, I could say yes without worrying about my schedule. I watched the name register. Brian Hutchison, one of the biggest mining operators in BC, and he'd asked for me. You're consulting for Hutchison Mining? Helen asked faintly. If tonight went well, yes. We'll see. I looked around the table. Anyway, I didn't mean to keep you from your dinner. The salmon here is supposed to be excellent. I started to turn away, then stopped. Oh, Derek, that advice about selling? The multiple you mentioned? You said 1 million, maybe 1 million to 5? He nodded mutely. The standard multiple for safety consulting firms is about 1.2 times annual revenue. We did 42 million last year. So if I were selling, which I'm not, I'd be looking at about 50 million, give or take. I smiled, but I appreciate you thinking of me. I walked back to my table, sat down, picked up my wine glass. That was cold, Andrew said, grinning. That was necessary, I corrected. Brian was shaking his head. 42 million in revenue? Christ, Graham. And they thought you were. Small time. Yeah. How did they not know? Because I didn't tell them. Because my wife never asked. Because I let them make assumptions. I took a sip of wine, and because for 3.5 years, I told myself it didn't matter what they thought. But it did matter, Brian said quietly. Yeah, it did. I didn't look back at their table, but I didn't need to. I could feel the silence, the shock, the recalculation happening behind me. Could imagine Derek doing the math, realizing that the man he'd patronized was worth more than everyone at that table combined. Could imagine Eleanor and Robert processing that their daughter had divorced someone who could have given her anything. Could imagine Helen wondering how different things might have been if they'd treated me with even basic respect. The rest of the dinner passed in comfortable conversation. Brian and I made concrete plans. Andrew told stories about our childhood in Calgary, about Dad's small safety business in the 70s, about how I'd turned it into something neither of us had imagined. Your father would be proud, Brian said. I hope so. When the bill came, I paid for the table. $340 for 3 people. A rounding error in my quarterly earnings, but a statement nonetheless. We stood to leave. As we walked past Derek's table, Eleanor called out, Graham, wait. I stopped, turned. She was standing now, napkin in her hand, twisted into a rope. I wanted to say we never knew. About your business. The scope of it. If we'd known. If you'd known, you would have treated me differently, I finished. I know. That's not fair, isn't it? I looked at all of them. For 3.5 years, you treated me like I wasn't good enough for your daughter. Not because of who I was as a person, but because of what you thought I did for a living. Because I didn't brag. Because I didn't show off. Because I believed that real wealth whispers. Graham, Robert said, we were wrong. We see that now. Now. You see it now. I shook my head. The thing is, I'm the same person I was 2 years ago. The same person I was at your anniversary dinner. The only thing that's changed is what you know about my bank account. Derek had gone completely pale. I was trying to help. You were trying to feel superior. You succeeded. For a while. Congratulations. Helen spoke up, her voice small. Patricia doesn't know, does she? About how successful you really are? The courts explained it to her during the divorce. But before that? No. She never asked, and I stopped trying to tell her. Does she know you're here? That we saw you? I smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. I imagine you'll tell her. Families talk. Eleanor reached out like she was going to touch my arm, then thought better of it. Graham, please. We were wrong about you. Terribly wrong, but surely you can understand we were just trying to protect our daughter. From what? From a man who loved her? Who would have given her anything? I shook my head. You weren't protecting her. You were protecting your idea of who she should be with, and she agreed with you. That's why we're not married anymore. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the neighboring tables had gone quiet, though they pretended not to listen. I should go, I said. Brian, Andrew, thank you for dinner. We walked out of Hawksworth, into the Vancouver night. The air was softer here than Calgary, damp with ocean mist. Andrew whistled low. That was something. That was closure, I said, and it was. Driving back to my hotel later, I realized I didn't feel angry anymore. I didn't feel vindicated. Exactly, though there was satisfaction in showing them who I really was. Mostly, I felt free. Free of the weight of their judgment. Free of trying to be enough for people who would never see me clearly. My phone buzzed as I pulled into the hotel parking lot. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me. Hello? Graham. Patricia's voice. I hadn't heard it in 2 years. My mother just called me. She said you were at Hawksworth, with some mining executive, that you told them about your company. That's accurate. 42 million, Graham? Her voice cracked. You made 42 million last year? The company did, yes. And you never told me. I tried. You didn't listen. When? When did you try? Every time your family made comments about money. Every time Derek suggested I sell. Every time your mother worried about your future. I tried to tell you that we were fine. That you didn't need to worry. That I had it covered. You didn't want to hear it. Because you said you were a consultant. You drove an old truck. You never. She stopped, breathed. Why didn't you just tell us? Because I shouldn't have had to. Because the fact that I didn't broadcast my net worth shouldn't have meant I deserved to be treated like I was less than. Because you were supposed to be my wife, Patricia. You were supposed to know me. I did know you. No. You knew what you wanted to see. A man who wasn't quite good enough. Someone you had to make excuses for. Someone who embarrassed you. That's not true. It is true. And you know what? I don't blame you anymore. You were raised to value certain things, to see success a certain way. That's who your family made you. But I'm not going to apologize for being different. She was quiet for a long time. I made a mistake. Yes, you did. Could we talk? Really talk? I'm in Vancouver next week for... No, Patricia. Graham, please. Let me explain. There's nothing to explain. You made your choice. You chose your family's opinion over our marriage. You chose silence over standing up for me. You chose to walk away instead of fighting for us. I pulled into a parking spot, turned off the engine. And honestly, I'm glad you did. Because I deserve better than someone who's only interested when they find out I'm rich. It's not about the money. It's entirely about the money. If I'd told you years ago, would your family have treated me the same way? Would you have stayed silent when Derek patronized me? Would you have moved back in with your parents after one argument? She didn't answer. That was answer enough. I have to go, I said. I hope you're well, Patricia. I really do. But we're done. We were done 2 years ago. Nothing's changed except your perception. I hung up before she could respond, sat in the truck for a moment, watching the lights of the city reflect off the hood. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was Andrew. You okay? Yeah, I'm good. That was intense back there. Long time coming. You know Patricia's going to spiral, right? When she realizes what she gave up. That's not my problem anymore. Cold, but fair. He paused. Dad would be proud, you know. Not just of the business, of you, how you handled yourself. I thought about my father, about his quiet way of moving through the world, about how he'd taught me that you didn't need to announce your success, that the work spoke for itself. He'd been right, mostly, but he'd also lived in a different time, when quiet confidence was enough. Now I knew better. Sometimes you had to speak up. Sometimes silence wasn't strength, it was just letting other people write your story. Thanks, Andrew. Get some sleep. Big day tomorrow. I went up to my room, ordered room service, sat by the window, looking out at Vancouver. My phone kept buzzing unknown numbers, probably Patricia calling from different phones. I turned it off. Somewhere across the city, Derek was probably explaining to Helen's family that he'd massively underestimated the man they'd spent years dismissing. Somewhere, Patricia was processing that she'd divorced someone who could have given her everything, not because he couldn't, but because she'd never asked. Somewhere, Eleanor and Robert were recalculating 3.5 years of dinners and comments and assumptions. And here, in this hotel room, I was finally at peace with letting them figure it out. Because the truth is, I didn't need their validation. I never had. I just needed to stop accepting their judgment. The salmon at Hawksworth had been excellent, by the way. Derek was right about that, at least. And that moment when the silence fell over their table, when they realized exactly how wrong they'd been, that was worth every difficult dinner, every patronizing comment, every moment of feeling small. Some lessons, I've learned, are expensive, but some victories are priceless. I slept well that night, better than I had in years.